Okay, awesome. Well, thank you all for coming here tonight. I know this is 7, so it's a little bit late for some folks. So I just wanted to say thank you. I'm Lou Nelson. I'm a new farm planner with the Pierce Conservation District. I work on the Key Peninsula and Gig Harbor Islands watershed. And today I'm just going to be giving you an overview of PCD services and the farm program in general. And then we'll have a great conversation about Firewise practices on livestock farms. So thank you all for being here tonight. So what is a conservation district? I know we have some CD folks here tonight, so that's awesome. I like to just give a overview of what our mission statement is because it really captures the heart of what we do. The Pierce Conservation District works with local landowners and public agencies to conserve natural resources that are essential to both our economy and our region's quality of life. Our collaborative efforts with citizen volunteers to create a just food system, improve water quality, and promote sustainable agriculture and recover wildlife are the heart of our mission. We have 5 key programs that we like to talk about, and that includes our farm planning and ag assistance, which I'll talk about more later. Our water quality, and nestled in there is climate resiliency program that James will touch more on later. Our water quality program has a lot to do with installing reed gardens, promoting habitat stewardship, and work parties as well in our local green areas and parks. Our habitat improvement works with both private and public lands to improve riparian, floodplain, and marine nearshore habitats. Our Harvest Pierce County program promotes access to local fresh food, working with community gardens and gleaning excess produce that would otherwise go to waste. And our environmental education program works with students all across the county to educate them on all things environmental, from salmon to pollinators. And the origin of conservation districts really comes as a solution to a national emergency. So in 1949, conservation districts were created as a response to the ecological disaster known as the Dust Bowl, which happened in the 1930s. The Dust Bowl was characterized by very severe dust storms that were caused by both severe drought that was through an extended period and mismanaged farming practices. So this was widely considered to be the worst man-made ecological disaster of American history. That being said, we've been working in conservation for over 75 years now. And there is a conservation district in every county in Washington, which I think is pretty cool. So getting into our farm planning and agricultural assistance program, we have a bunch of different programs that we have within this program itself. So we have farm events and workshops like that you're seeing right now. We connect folks to financial existence, and we work with promoting our equipment rental program as well as technical assistance. And I'll get into what all of these mean in a minute. So for our farm events and workshops, we have an archive of our past workshops and webinars on our website and YouTube channel. This ranges from backyard poultry health to mud and manure management, and it's a really great archive that I would highly recommend checking out. I would also like to promote our newsletter of upcoming events. We have funding opportunities, updates with the Conservation District, and new events and workshops so you don't miss a thing. Feel free to shoot me a message, and I'll be happy to get you added to that list. We also connect folks to financial assistance, and we have a few funding programs that we work on behalf of different cooperators for that. So we have funding for climate smart practices such as cross fencing for rotational grazing, cover crops, pasture seed, and hedgerows. We also have funding projects such as heavy use areas, roof runoff structures, underground outlets, and compost facilities to improve water quality in our local region. So if any of these ideas sound applicable to you and your farm, feel free to reach out to me and I'll connect you to a farm planner to talk about eligibility and see how this could work out on your farm. We also have an equipment rental program. This is not by any means exhaustive, but we have a no-till drill, we have a wood seeder, and a larger no-till drill. We have a lime spreader, 2 manure spreaders, a BCS walk-behind tractor with various implements. We also have equipment that is free to borrow, including a hay probe, temporary electric fencing, and tensiometers. And when we say that we offer technical assistance, what does this actually look like? We offer free we offer free site visits, so we actually go out and walk the property with you to address any sort of resources concerns or opportunities that you might have on your property. So this could consist of livestock, pasture, and hay field management, soil fertility, so reduced tillage and what that could look like for your property, mud and manure management, and composting facilities, heavy use areas. We also work with crop production, so implementing hedgerows and installing cover crops. We also can help with navigating regulations and permitting. So things can get really confusing, and we're able to help navigate all of the different elements when it comes to permitting. We also offer for free soil samples and custom recommendations. So we can actually come out to your property and take soil samples, send that off to the lab, and we're able to basically give you custom recommendations, whether you're managing 1 acre or 100 acres, we're here to help. So that's just a quick overview on Pierce Conservation District and what kind of services we offer. Here's my contact information as well. Um, and yeah, I'm going to pass it over to James now. Yeah, to talk about the climate resiliency program.
Okay, so let me get my PowerPoint up on here. Let's hope this works. And one more button should do it. There we go. Okay, so hello everyone. Good evening. My name is James Moore. I am the Climate Resilience Manager here at Pierce Conservation District. And I also work heavily with the Tacoma Pierce County Health Department as well as Pierce County Emergency Management. And this program came about from having community listening sessions and discussions about what was on the front of people's minds when it came to issues or emergencies or just general things they would like to see improved here in Pierce County. And of course, wildfire was on the top of that list. So I'm going to start a little bit with a bit more of the scientific stuff. But one of the main reasons that we are concerned about wildfire here in the Pacific Northwest is all that particulate matter that is in the air when something catches on fire. Now, certainly when you have stuff like, trees, plants and the like catching on fire, yes, it's going to have a little bit of that particulate matter in the air, volatiles, all sorts of different stuff. But when you have a wildfire, it's not just the organic stuff that burns. It's TVs, it's cars, it's homes. That's the stuff that makes a lot of those compounds, those really tiny PM 2.5 or particulate matter 2.5 bits that are going to go in the air and they're going to go eventually into your lungs. And you can see how tiny these things are on the screen here. You can see that's the width of a human hair. And then you have even smaller than that, the blue dots, PM10. So that's your typical dust, mold, pollen, again, organics. And then you have the PM 2.5, and that's so tiny that that just goes into your lungs and it just stays there for a very long time. Now, of course, we can keep track of those days when it is really poor air quality. We have set a couple records, worldwide records here, for really hazardous air quality, last year being one of those. But for the folks that like to keep track of this stuff, we have the air quality index. You can usually see that on a bunch of different websites. I have a few of them listed there. But main thing to keep in mind, your green, your yellow days, typically nothing really to worry about. Orange is when you should think about wearing a mask outside. Red, definitely want to stay inside if you can. Same goes for your animals. And purple or maroon, that's when you want to think about some sort of filtration if possible, or some MacGyvering, if you will. Which, speaking of MacGyvering, Here is a DIY box filter fan combo. So, all you do is you get yourself a $20 box fan off of Amazon, stick a MERV 13 or a FPR 10, same thing really, it's just different branding. Filter on there, make sure the arrow is pointing towards the back, and if you have all the doors and windows closed, 15 minutes, your air quality is going to be 90% better. And that could be in a barn, that could be in your kitchen, that could be in a classroom. It is very useful. I will also say, especially in the kitchen, because if you're like me and burn water, it's able to get rid of all that grease and everything else in the air that will just stick to the walls. But there is a lot of studies on this that the UW Seattle campus did, so fun reading, but there is scientific backing for this. And a couple other things that it does help with. So it helps during the winter when we have stagnant air. It helps when you have company over, you're trying to help with social distancing. And, just in general, it's great for folks that might have asthma, allergies, pets. Hey, it's really good for a whole bunch of variety of things. That's what I love about conservation districts is that it's pretty holistic when we suggest different ways to improve not just environmental health, but personal health. And a question I get a lot is when do you change those filters? Well, actually, a little bit of dust on those filters actually helps filter the air even more. But generally, when they start getting darker, grayer in color, or when you barely get close to it and you're starting to see particles fall off of it, that's when you can switch it out. You can usually get a pack of two off of Amazon for, about 10, $15, depending on the brand. Okay, so that brings me to the real reason that I love to get out in the field is wildfire. So this picture here is a map of the Wildland Urban Interface, or WUI, and you have several different colors here. But the main idea for what is the WUI, it's where the forest meets the human development or the communities. So in the gray areas, it's basically just all development. In the green areas, it's all forest. And then you have the yellow, which is intermixed. And then you have the red, which is that kind of not dangerous per se, but the mix of forest and home that we really want to pay attention to the most, that has the most potential for a fire incident. So if you take a close look, you can see some places like Enumclaw, Buckley, Bonnie Lake that have a lot of that intermix, that forest mixed with homes. And of course, I love people to take a look at the Key Peninsula. So that's across the bridge. You go past Gig Harbor, you go past Purdy, and then you see it is majority intermixed there. And the thing to keep in mind is if there is a fire that is, around there's a town called Home there, pretty on the nose. Uh, Everyone south of that is going to have to learn to swim really fast because that's the only way in and out of the Key Pen at a certain point there. So this is why we want to get these uh, education materials, emergency management, health department, all of us together to work towards getting people ready. So, what are we doing to increase the odds of the forest survival? So we'll certainly get to around homes and everything, but we have our friendly neighborhood critters out in the forest. What are we doing there? So, one of the big concepts is called ladder fuels. So think of it like if you have a small shrub touching a shrub that's a little bit taller, and then a sapling that's a little bit taller than that, and then that sapling is touching a younger tree, and so on and so forth until it touches the top of the canopy. So in other words, something that starts on the ground as a ground fire can move up through the canopy, and once it is in the crown of the trees, it makes it much harder to fight fires. So, especially along roads or especially in more of that wildland urban interface areas, if we can keep those separate, or at least as separate as possible where the forest meets the homes, then it's much more likely that the fire can be taken care of safely. Other things that you can do as well for forests, maintaining fuel breaks and buffers, uh, just putting a separation between big parcels of fuel. And over time, manage so that bigger trees are the ones that are still around. So cut down the uh, younger, smaller trees that are probably going to stay pretty spindly if you don't thin them out, and let the bigger trees grow up and they will become much more fire resistant. So, wildfires in communities. Now, I love this picture here because I always ask the question, what do you think is going to be the biggest threat to this community? And of course, people see the picture and they say, oh, it's the giant wall of fire that's coming down the hill. Well, turns out actually embers are the biggest threat to a community. Embers are those little tiny flame, well, not flames, but little specks of fire that float through the air and they can float for miles. Uh, and they can go anywhere that snow might fall. You can think of it that way. And once they settle on something, they can smolder and eventually catch a whole structure on fire. Now, in terms of this picture, you see the big wall of fire there. You think, oh, that's scary. Sure, it is. But the fun part about fire is that it has its own physics, and fire likes to travel faster uphill instead of downhill. In this case, the bigger threat is if there's a wind event that brings some embers onto those houses, it just takes one of those houses catching on fire to start doing a structure to structure fire. That's, again, what's going to be a bigger threat than a wall of fire just coming down the side of a mountain there. But again, this is where a lot of you have those new developments with the forest. And there's a lot of stuff that we can do to make sure that, people are safer. And of course, it's great if one person starts making a fire safe property, but it compounds a lot the more people that do it together. So that's where it comes into that house to house concept. And a little bit more on embers. So this picture here, this is from the Sleepy Hollow fire back in 2015 over in Wenatchee. And that's what we call an ember storm. Some folks might have seen that last year during the LA fires where you saw that McDonald's sign that was just getting blasted. Each one of those little specks, they can go into the smallest cracks and crevices. Uh, but we have a few ways of mitigating that, which I'll get into later. Is that your best chance of protecting your home is keeping an eye on stuff on your property. It's not what your neighbor does, it's what you do to help defend yourself. What you do to help defend your barn, your garage, your main home, your trailer. I've gone out to several trailer parks. It all starts with, your place first. And the main thing to keep in mind is if homes don't ignite, they don't burn. Seems straightforward. It is straightforward, but it's something to keep in mind. Now, normally I have a video here and we can send out a link to that, but an insurance company actually built some model homes inside of a warehouse and just blasted them with embers. And it was really impressive how they were able to see exactly what lit on fire first. And I'll be going into that, of course, in a few slides from now. But the typical stuff was gutters, beauty bark, and any sort of stuff that could flow through ventilation. Okay, let's see. There we go. Again, not going to play the video, but this is the model homes that they built, and as well as if you are interested and you're in Pierce County, I also get to bring out a little model home that one of our AmeriCorps built that is just fantastic and a great visual aid. Okay, let's see if that sticks onto the right thing. There we go. Yep, perfect. So, what tools do we have in our toolbox right now? So, the Department of Natural Resources in Washington State has their own program called Wildfire Ready Neighbors. And this is their premier program. There are programs like it around the US, but this one is ours. And the idea is that you sign up online, or you could email me directly, or really anyone at a conservation district in your local area will likely have the same program. And it is a free program, completely free. We'll never ask for any sort of payment. And what we do is we come out, schedule a time with you, and we walk and talk around your property for about an hour. And from there, we just write suggestions, typically either cheap or weekend warrior stuff. Sometimes a few things that you can potentially save up for. But we're never going to be like, if you do not do this, your house is going to burn down tomorrow. No. What we do is we just try to offer resources. That's what conservation districts do in general. We're non-regulatory, and as much as you don't want someone showing up on your door saying, "We're from the government, we're here to help," generally that's actually what we do is provide resources for folks. We also work with conservation district foresters, DNR foresters, fire district personnel. Oftentimes, if you're interested in a more community-based approach, which I'll get into the Firewise program in a minute, I can bring out several other more local agencies that know your area better. Firefighters, they know a lot more about the local scenarios than I would. So, the concept for reducing your wildfire risk around the home, around your barn, is you pay attention to the first 100 feet. Of course, the first five most important, 5 to 30 feet out, still important. It will still improve your odds. And then 30 to 100 feet out, that's, lower priority. But once you get past that 100 feet, then your return on investment, so to speak, starts to go down. Now, that's not to say you shouldn't do the best you can, as far as you can, but it's best to focus on that immediate 0 to 5 feet out. So, what can you do? So, you can imagine this as a barn, a garage, a home, pretty similar with all of them. It's just how important the structure is to you. And I assume if you have livestock, a barn would be probably the most important, of course. But several things that you can do around a building. For instance, I mentioned earlier keeping gutters clean, keeping moss off the roof. When that dries out in the summer, it's super flammable. But some of the stuff that people don't necessarily think of right off the bat are fences connected to buildings, quite common for barns. Oftentimes, I recommend putting a metal post or some metal flashing between a fence and a building because that's what we call a wick for ignition. And what that means is think of it like a domino effect. If one end starts on fire, it's going to travel all the way up to the fence until it hits the building and then game over. Uh, Similar thing with decks. You often see that decorative lattice on decks. It's a lot more flammable. It's not really good even if you replace it with the plastic lattice because that stuff melts and can expose stuff behind it that can also catch on fire. I also oftentimes see arborvitaes, privacy hedges, small shrubs right next to buildings, right next to windows. And windows only need about 100 degrees Fahrenheit difference or quick change for them to crack. And fun fact, the air pressure inside of a building, specifically homes, is typically negative air pressure. So if a window cracks, it's going to suck in everything outside, especially those embers. And last but not least on here that I want to mention is ventilation. Now, ventilation is extremely important. Keep out mold, keep the airflow going in your home. But if you have gaps that are bigger than an eighth of an inch, it's going to allow in a lot of embers if there is an ember storm or even just an unlucky lightning strike setting stuff on fire. Now, at Pierce Conservation District, as well as Mason Conservation District and a few others around here, we offer free 1/8 inch metal mesh that you can put on your vents, whether they're crawl space vents or gable vents on the side of your home. But that's another reason why we're happy to come out because we can point out stuff for you that would work for you, as well as some different installation ideas. And again, most of this stuff, a lot of folks just can tack it on the outside. They don't have to go in their crawl space or into their attic. Or if they get their roof cleaned by someone, then they can also have them check it out and see if they can install it with some staples when they're available. Okay. Intermediate zone. So that's that 5 to 30 feet out. So pretty simple. I kind of refer to it as islanding things up. So in other words, not having one contiguous area of greenery, if at all possible, or if it is contiguous, then just have it nice and low to the ground. Because the main goal is lean, clean, and green. Now, certainly, I always tell folks no one wants to live in a concrete bunker. Yes, it would be great if you didn't have, anything flammable within the first 5 feet of your foundation. It would be great if you had complete lean, clean, and green in that intermediate zone. But really, in my opinion, it all has to do with what kind of maintenance you feel like putting in. Is it something that you can do every year around Mother's Day, just, on a regular scheduled basis? Maybe check your roof again around the 4th of July? Or is it something that you'll need to clean out, every couple weeks? For instance, if under a deck gets full of stuff, or if you have a woodshed that is open air most of the year. Do you have a bunch of wood shavings underneath that you need to blow out? It all depends on what kind of maintenance you're willing to put up with. Um, and beyond that, the extended zone. So again, it's not as important as the immediate zone or that intermediate zone, but really it has to do with the trees at this point. And the idea is keep trees spaced apart if possible, and also trimmed up off the ground or at least the nearest greenery underneath, so that you don't have anything going into the canopy. It's those ladder fuels again that we're trying to make sure that are kept in line. And beyond that, it's always good to, if you have a lot of trees, ask an arborist out, or if you have, a couple acres, ask for a forester. Get yourself a forest health assessment because it can really go a long ways for the longevity of your trees around there to maybe plant something in advance. Okay, working with neighbors. So this is that Firewise part I was talking about here. What is Firewise? So think of it as that Wildfire Ready Neighbors program, but with all of your neighbors working together for a similar goal. Because as I said before, one house is good, multiple houses nearby doing the same thing together is great. And of course, not everyone has 100 feet out from their home. So it's especially useful if you're in a community that has much smaller parcels. But beyond that, one of the things that is really tantalizing for this is that it's a national recognition program. So you will be nationally recognized with a sign that says, "Hey, we're part of the solution here. We're trying to get education with our folks and be safe for everyone around us." Awesome. But also, you get priority funding from the Washington Department of Natural Resources, which recently, for a good example, we got a $25,000 grant for a Firewise community down in McKenna. And they are currently doing a cleanup of all of their gates, which are decently overgrown, have some piles of around them, and also putting up some emergency signage. That could also include projects like creating an emergency evacuation plan, finding a evacuation spot that folks could take their livestock to, uh, education materials. It's all sorts of different stuff fire related that could money that could go towards. But the first thing that you got to do is become a Firewise community. And I can help you through that entire process. It sounds scarier than it is. It really takes just a few hours of walking and talking with a few of your community members with me or of another representative. I would write up a plan, I would write up an assessment, and then from there, it's just a matter of trying to get some volunteer hours or some sort of community investment each year. And believe you me, it's very small compared to how much money you can get for a community, especially here in Pierce County. The ratio of funding to community size is pretty nice. And just to go on that a little bit more, when there is funding available, a couple of the projects that we've done here at Pierce Conservation District. This was a forest, or rather a timberland down in Graham. Now, before you can see on the left, super brambly, those are all ladder fuels. They had slash piles from years stacked up there and a lot of turf grass. So they were able to, we worked with them to find a contractor. And as you can see on the right, all cleaned up. Now, certainly that's a bit bare bones, but they're replanting it, or rather have replanted it with native species, more ground cover, stuff that wouldn't become as brambly, and also make it harder for those invasive species to come back. Uh, Something very simple, but also can be doable in a backyard. This is also that continuity of fuels again, how contiguous they are. So, for instance, you have a bunch of wood chips, great for garden beds, certainly, but they're separated now by just a small hardscape barrier or a small pathway. So, if, for instance, unlucky firework lands in those wood chips around the 4th of July, which, of course, as you all know, this is the 250th, it's going to be one crazy 4th. Uh, it's going to hit that. There we go. It's going to hit that hardscape, and it's going to either slow down or completely fizzle out before it touches the grass. Now, of course, you can water your grass. That's a great idea too. But it also is in terms of maintenance. Okay, now you don't have to water your grass as much, especially if it's in the summertime. We're in a drought, which guess what we're in right now. And it's just simple stuff like that that can also still beautify your property. And this one is one of my favorites here. This is over in Lakewood in Pierce County. Now, this is a 180 some odd unit condo complex that's right above Chambers Creek. Now, for several years, and this is just in terms of economics, their landscaping company was throwing a lot of their uh, plant debris just on the side of their overhang of the creek. Now, certainly, that's going to create a big fuel problem, big fuel loading, and given that this whole community was on top of a hill and fire travels faster uphill, that's a problem. But we were able to help them out. They're a Firewise community, and we got them some funding alongside the DNR. And as you can see on the right, a lot of trees were limbed up. All of the plant matter that was on top of the overhang there, the cliff, was taken out. Certainly, there's still stuff down below, but at least it's not going to create a hazard for firefighters, and it's not also going to be as easy to blow embers onto their facilities. So those are just a couple of the ideas, a couple programs that we've done. I'm always happy if you reach out to me with questions, ideas, or if you need help finding your local regional coordinator for the Firewise or Fire Ready Neighbors programs. Happy to help. And last but not least here, just a good old shout out to PC Alerts. If you're in Pierce County, and your county probably has a very similar notification system, but notification systems like this, you can sign up for multiple locations. And for instance, if you put in your kid's school and there's an emergency around there, you'll be notified. And this is especially great for wildfires because you can get different instructions, or at least they'll tell you where you should turn into to figure stuff out. And also gives you better timing if you have horses, if you have livestock that you might need to get in a trailer as fast as possible and potentially leave a little bit sooner than everyone else. So that was a lot. I'm just going to leave my contact information there for a sec. But I am going to hand it back over to Lou, and I'll certainly answer any questions at the end of the presentation because that was a fire hose of information. Thank you so much. Back to you, Lou.
Great. Thank you, James. That was really great. I'm going to pass it over to Greta Cook. She is part of the Washington State Animal Response Team. She's going to be talking about evacuation protocols and all that her organization has to offer. So thank you.
Okay, let's pull that up. Can everybody see that? Uh,
Not seeing anything yet.
hmm. All right, where did it go? Why is it not share? Come on.
We can see your desktop now, Greta. There it
Okay,
is.
how
There you
about
go.
now?
Yep.
Oh, good. Okay. So, thank you for the invite. My name is Greta Cook. I am the co-founder of WASART. We started up 19 years ago and are super happy to be here. I am a horse owner and have a property out in Enumclaw. So this all really impacts me. And, and so I'm glad to share a little bit. All right, now why don't you want to advance for me? Okay, come on here. Let's see. All right, there we go. WASART, the Washington State Animal Response Team, was started in 2007, and our mission, we are all about helping animals and their owners in emergencies. And predominantly, our main clients are horses and dogs. Um, but as we go along here, you'll see a few more of the critters. Now, why don't you want to advance? There we go. All right. So we are an all-volunteer 501c3 organization. We are donation supported. We do operate statewide 24/7. We don't love going out in the middle of the night, but we definitely have done that quite a bit. We are non-regulatory, and all of our members are uh, that are deploying are certified and credentialed state emergency.
Yeah.
We predominantly do, well, we started intending to do emergency sheltering. After Hurricane Katrina and a number of floods here in the state in 2007 and 8, we were looking at the need for sheltering support for predominantly horses and livestock. And so that was the impetus for getting us going. Then we received all sorts of calls on more the technical rescue side for horses, primarily that were down in their field, needing some help. And so we started building those skills and supplies. And then along the way, we've always been very focused on community outreach, education, with preparedness as part of my background. That was easy to want to incorporate. With the emergency sheltering, we focus on temporary evacuation shelters that will house pets, horses, and livestock. We've done cooling shelters and have been put on notice a number of times on standby to do warming shelters, which is more of a daily care versus the overnight, multiple day that we've done with the temporary evacuation shelters. And those have generally been for fires as well as flooding. And then our technical rescue team has advanced tremendously over the years, and we are set up to do heavy system rescues, which think your large horse or your large bovine. Fortunately, we don't get too many of the cattle. Horses, again, tend to be one of our main clients. Um, and so over the years, we have gathered a lot of supplies. And what you're looking at right now is our 22-foot aluminum tripod that can also be rigged as a bipod, and our Becker sling raise system. And then we also do a lot of dog rescues, and that falls under our light system, which tends to be 500 pounds and less. Our over-the-cliff rescue can be done in using the litter, the orange thing. It is a human litter that we utilize for dogs and people if needed. But then we can also put a wheel on it, and just like it can be used for a human pack out, we oftentimes are hauling out a dog that has gotten ill or injured and not able to get down the trail on their own. We have a myriad of rescue vehicles. The three upper vehicles are our technical rescue response vehicles, and we've got those staged north and south of I-90. We've got the full large and small contingent, and then the transit van is our newest rig, and that is based along I-90. And then all of our sheltering vehicles are down in the Enumclaw area. We fortunately received the AKC Reunite Pet Disaster Relief Trailer as a donation, and that can support about 50 companion animals. And then we've also got large animal supplies and a trailer, a flatbed trailer that hauls our corral panels. So we can set up temporary corral pens or make it into a loading chute. It's a really handy item to have. Oops, that's the wrong way. Let's go this way. And so that's a bit about WASART. And now talking about impacts of wildfire on animals. So, just as James was talking about air quality for humans, likewise, our animals can be greatly impacted and have a lot of breathing difficulty, which will affect their usability for 4 to 6 weeks following the effects of smoke, and it is dose dependent. It depends again how much they get and how long, and then just their own basic constitution. And of course, burns are another big concern. And that's one of the reasons why we want to make sure that we take any synthetic, any plastic based items off of our animals. It's summertime and flies are an issue some places, and especially horse owners sometimes will now blanket their horses with special blankets that keep the flies off, but those are generally made out of a synthetic material, and that would be a real burn hazard. And then just the general heat stress, lacerations from moving around in a unfamiliar area. As soon as fires come in, really impacts the animal's senses, and they can get disoriented very easily, and their natural flight instinct kicks in, and their desire to get away in a hurry means that they're not necessarily concerned about what they may be running into or through in the process. And just the general stress of being involved in this kind of an event is not to be forgotten. And then, of course, there are all sorts of toxins that are now in the environment that can end up on the grass or the feed and water that they are consuming. And so that can create other challenges for them. And remembering that, anytime we've got loose animals moving around, they can especially be a danger to emergency response vehicles or even us if we are trying to evacuate and somebody else has turned their animals loose and they're running, for their lives. that they can get tangled up with vehicles, and that can be a real danger that we want to attempt to mitigate if possible. So turning animals loose should hopefully not be the first choice, but the very last. So on the preparedness front, it is an ongoing process. You know, every time you go to the store and get food and supplies for yourself and your animals, you know, that's stuff that can be incorporated into your plans for uh, if you need to evacuate or shelter in place. But you need to start by thinking about um, what do you need to be safe if you do need to evacuate, taking your important documents and some basic emergency supplies with you so that you can, you know, take care of yourself and your critters wherever you happen to end up. And getting trained first aid for ourselves, for our animals, is super helpful. There's the CERT Community Emergency Response Team is a fabulous training program that gives overall preparedness and tends to be hosted by fire departments. Always good to have good connections there with the fire department. Um, and then looking at how you can get involved more with your neighbors, your family, your friends, and your community. I always like to a minimum of a 2 week supply of those critical things, your food, water, and medications if at all possible. And if you do have a trailer or a vehicle that you can transport your animals in, having a minimum 3 day supply, because of course things happen when we are out and about, and we might not be able to get back home to get back to our 2 week supply. So having something always in there is a good buffer. And then if we are sheltering in place, we want to find that safe space that we can keep our animals that is hopefully as free of any debris, any flammable items. Um, so I'm thinking of a pasture that has been eaten down, a dry lot area, a sand arena. Uh, Maybe you don't have any of those on your property, but maybe a neighbor does. And so that's another good reason to look at partnering with your neighbors and friends. And then putting your water and feed in metal containers that are going to be hopefully right in the middle where they are least likely to get burned. Uh, I myself don't have very large metal containers. I do have a lot of the big Rubbermaid plastic containers. And so as they are aging out, I am starting to replace them with metal containers. It is a process. You know, if you have the resources to go ahead and change that out now, great. If not, just know that there is risk and that there's options as you go along with your planning. Uh, as I mentioned before, with the synthetics, we want to make sure we are getting those off of our animals so that they don't become a a hazard that potentially melts onto the animal. And using, you know, cotton or leather for your halter or your collar if you've got dogs. Uh, it's another of those that we have to think about the metal connectors that are used to keep the halters and the collars together. So just be aware and think, is this the best choice I can make with what I have available, or is there another option, keeping the melting synthetics in mind? And then, as James was talking earlier, going around and seeing how you can harden the different areas that you've got your animal. Those buildings, is there stuff that you can clear right around the bases of your buildings, your stalls? I know certain times of the year, things really grow quickly in the spring, and it can be easy to get behind with just hacking the foliage back. But that's forever on my to-do list, it seems. And then also thinking about your feed and your water supplies. Again, I've got a barn with some of the hay that is upstairs in the loft because that is how it works on my property. If I've got my horses in their fire safe area, I'm going to bring hay out and keep it away from the fire safe area, but still accessible for feeding. I've got 55-gallon drums for water, and those aren't the easiest thing to roll around. So schlepping buckets of water might be what you have to do. Just another thing to think about how you might manage that. And then, of course, fencing. The the option of metal wire fencing uh, or metal panels is fantastic. If you have that resource available, utilize it. If you don't, see what other options you can use and be creative so that you just pick the best location that works for you. And so then evacuating, sorry, my uh, operator error here. Thinking about getting out early. This is one thing that so often happens where people wait until everybody else is on the road. But because you've been thinking about planning and you've come up with a plan of how you're going to shelter in place, if that's an option, but also how you can evacuate most effectively and efficiently, thinking where will you go and how will you get there? Will there be road access, or are you needing to, go through a very congested area that everybody else is going to be going down? Uh, Thinking what options do you have? Uh, I love getting a map out. Yes, I'm old school with physical maps, and looking at what options do I have? Do I think I can get my truck and trailer through roads that might be less used? But also thinking if I get stuck, what am I going to do then? Which might lead to needing to go on foot. So is that an option for you to lead your animal out from where you are currently trapped? And with fuel prices today being ever increasing, you might be inclined not to keep a full tank, but keep in mind that fuel might be really hard to get. So it's such a catch-22 in that it is it is flammable, it is a fire hazard, but it also is critical. So just thinking how can you manage that safely so you have what you need when you need to get out on the road. And of course, what are you going to be taking with you? Of course, you've got your plan now, and so you're getting your animals lined out and getting everybody loaded up, and you've got your documents and your food and water, your first aid kit, some tools that is going to help you when you get wherever you are going to go and get set up for your temporary sheltering. Maybe that is just at a neighbor's. Maybe it is miles away at a friend's or at the fairground, or if there is an emergency shelter nearby that you might be heading to. Be sure and let everybody know what your plans are. And if you've got more animals than you can transport in one go, what is the priority of those animals, which is really hard to think about. But doing it ahead of time, if you've got an animal that just does not like to load up, they might need to be on the second round. Um, Always thinking that the time is of essence. I am continuing to go backwards here. So making sure that your animals are ready to go, part of that fun is practicing with loading and making sure you've got the space, making sure the animals will actually go in. If you don't have a trailer or a vehicle that you can get your animals into, who do you know that can help you out there, and can you get together, practice with them, let other people handle your animals and load them, and put it, your headlamp on. That can be very disorienting for animals, so that's a good thing to practice as well. And make sure you've got some temporary ID. That can be using a marker to write on the hooves. You know, with your phone number, you can get some livestock paint or marker pens that you can write on the hair coat to help identify your animals. But bottom line is you got to practice. So some of the effects of exposure to wildfires, can be long-reaching. So during and after, we really want to limit their activity and exercise. Lots of fresh water to help soothe, and with their feed, watering it down to keep the dust down is also going to help reduce some of the irritation. Likewise, you can sprinkle their, if they've got bedding or if they are in a dusty paddock, um, that can be really helpful. And James talked about setting up the fan filter. That's going to be pretty tricky for most of us in our various, livestock situations, with no way to close down a building tight enough that we can run air filters. But if that is available at your property, now you have that option, which could be very helpful. And then just remembering to give your animals a good month and a half to recover from their exposure. So we have a lot of resources on our website. and you can go ahead and use that QR code that takes you directly there, or just wasart.org, and you can navigate your way to the resources. Our 425 phone number here is our 24/7 phone number that if you are in a distressing situation, you can call us and we will see if there's a way that we can help you out. And I think we are to the question part, but I'm going to hand it back over to Lou to take on that.
Great. Thank you so much, Greta. That was fantastic. I feel like we learned so much about things that not necessarily folks think about initially when they're trying to manage their farms. I mean, a lot of things that come second nature that you really need to be mindful about. Um, This is the part of the presentation where we're opening it up to the rest of the audience, and feel free to type your questions into the chat, or feel free to also unmute yourself. We're here to answer questions and help brainstorm any situations that you might have encountered in the past.
James, Diane Fish here from Kitsap. I was wondering if the types of services that Pierce provides for farm and landowners about doing property assessments restricts their activity just to Pierce, or can you serve other counties?
Hi, Diane. Always a pleasure. So we have a cooperative agreement with Mason Conservation District, and they do the same stuff that I do out in Kitsap, Pierce, Thurston, and Jefferson. That being said, the Department of Natural Resources, who puts on the program, they have regional coordinators all over the state that will likely be able to offer the same exact programming in pretty much every county. I know for a fact that King Conservation District in King County, they do the same thing that I do and do site visits even in more urban settings.
Thank you very much.
We have a comment in the chat from Diana. Thank you, Diana. I've run into issues regarding I think I'm not familiar with this term, surling back trees. Kitsap County wanted me to pay them oh, clearing. Got it. Clearing back trees. Kitsap County wanted me to pay them to create a safety barrier.
I might be able to take that a little bit. So if I understand correctly, you're wanting to create for instance, maybe a fuel break between maybe a building and the trees. I will say, generally speaking, probably 99% of the time, I don't recommend cutting down a tree. I always recommend trimming up branches 6 to 10 feet off the ground. And typically, I'm in Pierce County, not in Kitsap, different rules, so Diane might know a bit more on that front. But trimming trees off the ground versus cutting them down is usually perfectly acceptable. Like general tree maintenance or maintaining them is fine. Um, so yeah, and even if, again, if a tree overhangs the roof, if you can try to trim up branches, 10 feet above that, if possible, trim them back, try to direct way in terms of how you're trimming things. At least in Pierce County, there shouldn't be any issue with that. Cutting them down, different story. But yeah.
Yeah, it looks like she later said, I have a forest and the trees are within 50 feet of my barn and 5 feet of the corral. So it sounds like yeah, following the different um setbacks that James has outlined for restriction zones might be something to look into with someone to come out on your property,
Yeah,
if that's something that you're interested in.
now that I also see that, I'd highly recommend asking out one of our foresters. Feel free to send me an email. But again, we have that cooperation with Mason, and they'll come out to Kitsap, and they could likely give you some even much better pointers than I could in terms of tree health, potential thinning. And the DNR as well can also very much help with that. They have funds available for thinning projects and the like. So if it doesn't go necessarily through the county itself, the Department of Natural Resources, as well as the Conservation District, can likely help in some capacity. But again, I'm not certified in treeology, if you will. Mine is fire.
Yeah, this is Diane Fish with Kitsap Conservation District. If you reach out to, I'll put my email in the chat. If you reach out, we'll connect you with the forester from Mason, who will be able to help you with decisions about whether to thin, whether it's a danger tree, or how to deal with that close-up zone.
Thank you, Diane. That's really helpful. Do we have any other questions that we might want to pose? I have a question for Greta. Um, how can I help emergency responders coming to my rescue if I'm away from home or on vacation and unable to evacuate them?
Great question. So making sure, first off, that your address is easy to read as they are coming up to the property, and leaving a sign if you have left the property but animals are left behind, um, leaving a sign that is either depending on your property, it's on the barn, on the gate or fence coming into your property that tells responders where animals are located, how many you have or should have, and where they can find feed and supplies that can help either to just stay and shelter in place and just feed the animals, keep them there, or to get halters and lead ropes and the like to help get them loaded up and taken to an emergency shelter.
Absolutely. And then I have another question. And this is a situation that a lot of us would have a hard time thinking about, but it's important to discuss nonetheless. If you can't evacuate your animals and they get lost, what can you do?
So if you don't know where your animals have gone, then you want to reach out to animal control and potentially your local law enforcement in this type of a situation where it is a larger disaster that is impacting a larger area. You can reach out to emergency management. They will often post a phone number that you can call to let them know that you have missing animals. So law enforcement, fire, animal control, all those agencies can help. If you've got your phone and power, then definitely post on missing animal Facebook groups. Um, that's another thing you can do, as well as putting up signs that you have an animal that's gone missing. And if you can set up a independent email address, so yeah, you're not necessarily going to get spammed by anybody else who might come across your lost signs, can be helpful. And I see Ron posted that having a barn book that includes emergency information about the animals is great. So another thing I have on each of the stalls for my horses is their basic information, their name, how old they are, their gender, how much feed they typically get, and how to contact me. Then in my emergency book, I've got that same information, but in more detail, along with their vaccination records and medical history, and also a authorization to make emergency decisions. So I've got various people authorized that can do that, as well as my vet information is in there, so they know my wishes for all my animals.
That's great. I was
Yeah.
curious if you could speak to, in the case that one of our animals are injured and help is not available, I was curious if you could speak to any opportunities for learning first aid or CPR techniques for both humans and animals. Is there any resources you have for that or?
Yes, we do. Gosh, I don't know actually if they are on our website, but I will be sure and add that. So you can do a Google search for animal first aid. And also, if you've got predominantly large animals, talk to your vet and see if they are willing to potentially help you whenever my vet comes out for annual exams. I always go over a few of the basic first aid things that uh, tend to um, tend to cause more of a challenge for me to, just knowing what the baseline is for your animals, and how to check their breathing and their respiration, what is normal. Um, so talk to your vet. Definitely do a Google search, and then I will add a couple of resources to our website
Perfect.
for other groups. Mhm.
Great. I think that was all of the questions that we had personally that I wanted to cover. I want to give a final opportunity to pose this to any of the participants to see if they have any questions. I promise we don't bite. But of course, we are going to be sending out a final email just to thank you all for your participation and then give you all our contact information in the case that you want to follow up on some of the conversations that we've had today, along with other resources that we've encountered that we would think that would be helpful. I just want to give a big thank you to James, Lenore, and Greta. They've been extremely helpful, and WASART has been extremely informative, and we're very fortunate to get to work with them. So I just want to give you a big thank you. And thank you all for attending tonight. We appreciate your time, and this recording will be uploaded to YouTube very shortly. So be on the lookout for the recording and feel free to share for your friends. All right. Thank you all.
Thank you.
All right.
Have
Have
a
a
good
good night,
night. Thanks,
everyone.
everyone.